After a week in which resulted in two top 10 teams being upset at home, we are on to week 6 of the college football season. And I have always thought the college football season is divided into 4 different phases. At least ever since we had the original college football playoff format. Phase 1, late August, September, that is phase 1. It's the opening act for these teams. We get our first look at how these teams are looking and how they potentially could look as the season goes along. Phase 2, which is the phase we're in right now, the month of October, I feel like October is the turning point of the college football season. And with the way the schedule is lined up for these next few weeks, I definitely do think that we will see a major turning point in this college football season. Phase 3, the month of November, the boiling point of the season, is what I have referred it to as for a long time, where chaos happens as teams, they falter under the pressure, trying to keep a hold of their college football playoff positioning, teams looking to play spoiler, teams that are looking to make a bowl game, teams that are just looking to gain some momentum for next season, and then phase 4, the month of December, all the way through the national championship game, the postseason play, conference championships, the bowl games, the college football playoff, and of course the national championship game. For week 6, I will admit I had a difficult time trying to decide what were the 7 best games this week, as it felt like I was scraping at the bottom of the barrel trying to get the 7 best matchups this week. But the 7 matchups on the docket this week: Clemson and Florida State, Rutgers and Nebraska, Tennessee and Arkansas, Michigan and Washington in a rematch of last season's national championship game, Ole Miss and South Carolina, Miami and Cal, and closing things out with Missouri and Texas A&M. Without further ado, let's get into the Week 6 college football predictions. Starting things off with number 15 Clemson and Florida State, and there might be people wondering why I have this game as one of my 7 games on the docket this week, with Florida State being 1-4 this season and Clemson being ranked 15th in the country. And it is because it's a rivalry game. When it's a rivalry game, it doesn't matter where the teams are in the rankings. It doesn't matter what the teams' records are. It doesn't matter what the teams have done in recent weeks leading up into this game. Rivalry games are rivalry games for a reason. The pageantry, the intensity, and I do think Clemson does win this game convincingly. Despite this being a road game, rivalry games are very challenging for the visiting team. And they're going up against a Florida State team that has nothing to lose at this point. Florida State, they just have everything to gain from this game. And they need some momentum this season, being 1-4. And it's undecided right now who will be the quarterback for Florida State in this matchup. Will it be DJU or will it be Brock Glenn? Either way, I don't think it matters, despite Florida State with nothing to lose in this situation, and Clemson with just about everything to lose. Clemson, they have scored 55 points per game since week 1 against Georgia. And against Georgia in week 1, they were in the game at halftime, but once the second half got going, Clemson, they really let the game get away from them. For the season, they're averaging 42 points per game, which is 14th in the FBS. And I do think Clemson, they do continue rolling throughout this season, as ever since the Georgia game, it has looked like Clemson has figured it out, at least offensively. But I do think this is the first real challenge for Clemson since the Georgia game in week 1, despite Florida State being 1-4 this season, as rivalry games are always challenging no matter where you are in the rankings or what your record is or what your opponent's record is. I do think Clemson wins this convincingly. Rutgers and Nebraska. Rutgers is 4-0 on the season so far, but a relatively quiet 4-0 right now. Not many people are talking about Rutgers being undefeated right now. But if Rutgers were to win this game, then I do think people would start talking about Rutgers a lot more. And big reasons why they're 4-0. They're 8th in time of possession. They're 12th in rushing offense. Running back Kyle Monangai, 5th in the FBS with 589 rushing yards so far this season. Their defense gives up an average of 16.25 points per game, 29th in the FBS. And they convert on third down 51% of the time, which is 17th in the FBS. For Nebraska, this is their homecoming game. And they did respond after losing to Illinois in what was supposed to be a special night for Lincoln, Nebraska, to celebrate the 400th consecutive home sellout. But the fans went home in devastation and disappointment and wondering, is Nebraska going back to their same old ways? They did get the win against Purdue, but it was not a very convincing win by any means. I mean, you can look at the final score of the game all you want, but it was not a win that Nebraska fans should be proud of, if you ask me, because it was scoreless at halftime. And honestly, Peacock should be embarrassed for making people have to have Peacock to watch that game. That was just absolutely horrendous. But they were dominant in the second half when it mattered. And issues for Nebraska, lack of discipline on defense, that's what cost them against Illinois. And special teams has been horrendous for Nebraska as of late. They are 1 for 5 in field goal attempts in their last 2 games. But the defense, they're still in the top 10 in scoring defense. In fact, they are 9th, allowing an average of 12.2 points per game on average. And with this being a homecoming game for Nebraska, and the fact that Nebraska, they did establish momentum in that second half of the Purdue game, I do think that confidence will pay off for Nebraska. And I do think they get the win for as long as they can stay disciplined. I just feel like that this is Rutgers' biggest challenge so far this season. They do have a win against Virginia Tech, who they honestly could have beaten Miami if there may have been some controversy at the end, maybe or not. But I do think Nebraska gets the win. However, if Rutgers does win this game, I do think people will start to take Rutgers a lot more seriously. And if Nebraska were to lose, it's how do they lose? They lose the same ways that they have been. Tennessee and Arkansas. Tennessee is off of a bye week the week prior. An emotional victory on the road against Oklahoma. The Volunteers, they lead the FBS in scoring offense, scoring an average of 54 points per game. They're second in scoring defense, only allowing an average of 7 points per game. They're third in total offense, averaging nearly 566 yards per game. And running back Dylan Sampson, averaging 6.5 yards per carry. And they go on the road to take on what I feel like is a very underrated Arkansas team. Arkansas, they are 13th in total offense, averaging 495 yards per game. Arkansas, I feel like they beat themselves against Oklahoma State and Texas A&M. They had 3 turnovers in both of those games, which they ended up being costly. And if Arkansas played cleaner football, they could be 5-0 right now. That is how underrated I feel like this Arkansas team is. Running back Jaquindon Jackson leads the SEC in rushing yards with 509 on the season so far. Arkansas's defense allowed 153 rushing yards last week to Texas A&M. Taylon Green has thrown 5 interceptions in the last 4 games. Arkansas is about a 2-touchdown underdog right now. And I do think if Arkansas can play clean football from start to finish, I do think Arkansas can not only cover the 2-touchdown spread, but they could win outright and pull off the upset. That is how confident I am in Arkansas's potential. Plus, Sam Pittman knows that he is on the hot seat, and if Arkansas does not perform well this season, he is on his way out. I do think Tennessee wins this game. However, I think Arkansas will cover in this game. I can't see Arkansas losing by more than 2 touchdowns in this game with how their offense is and their ability to move the football. I do like the Volunteers, but I do think the Razorbacks, I do think that they do show grit and toughness in this game, and they do cover. Up next, number 10 Michigan and Washington, a rematch of the national title game. And I'm going to be honest, I am a little surprised that College Game Day didn't go to this game when you consider the fact this is a national title game rematch. And I had to do some thinking for this game. Because right now, Washington is a 3-point favorite in this game. So I had to expand my research on why Washington is favored by 3 points. For Michigan, the status for corner Will Johnson and Josiah Stewart, they are in question right now. They both did not play in the Minnesota game last week, where Michigan, they only won by 3 points. It's Michigan's first road game of the season. Washington, they're 10th in total defense, 10th in scoring defense, only giving up an average of 12.4 points per game. Quarterback Will Rogers, he's completed nearly 75% of his passes, 10 touchdown passes, and no interceptions. Running back Jonah Coleman, 11th in the FBS in rushing yards, with 521 on the year. And also, Michigan, they have been pretty underwhelming so far this season. Yes, they do have a productive win over USC. But Michigan, they have still been really underwhelming throughout the season. As Michigan, they have relied on their running game throughout the year, especially from Khalil Mullings. 540 rushing yards on the year, which is 8th in the FBS. This does kind of feel like a trap no matter which way you go for this game. Because I do feel like at this point, if you're facing off against Michigan, all you have to do is just sell the run, it feels like, because clearly Michigan is afraid of throwing the football. At least that's what I've noticed so far this season, especially in the past couple of games. As I believe Michigan only had, I think it was 30-something passing yards, and then maybe about twice as that last week against Minnesota. I am I feel like no matter which way I go for this game, the team I pick is going to lose. But I am going to pick Michigan to win this game because I do think that the running game is going to once again carry Michigan, just like it has throughout this entire season. But if Washington does win this game, it's going to be because they're able to contain the running game for Michigan successfully. And they were able to force Michigan to have to throw the football down the field in what's going to definitely be a very hostile environment when you consider the circumstances. As this is the team that ended Washington's season last year, despite the two teams being completely different than last season. I am going to pick the Wolverines. Number 12, Ole Miss and South Carolina. Ole Miss looks to bounce back after being upset at home by Kentucky last week. And they go on the road to take on a South Carolina team who in recent years have had a knack for pulling off upsets. And South Carolina, they almost pulled off another upset a few weeks ago against LSU in what was arguably up until this past Friday night the most controversial game of the season. So many comments about how horrendous the officiating was in the LSU South Carolina game back in week 3. Despite Ole Miss being 7th in scoring offense, scoring an average of 47.4 points per game, being 5th in scoring defense, only giving up an average of 8.4 points per game, being 1st in total offense, averaging over 607 yards per game, and Jackson Dart leading the FBS in passing yards with 1,815 on the season. I feel like this Ole Miss team is going to have their hands full with South Carolina. Just like Arkansas, I do feel like South Carolina, they are flying under the radar a little bit. I do feel like that South Carolina at any given moment, they can pull off an upset. And we've seen that in recent years and almost earlier in the season. The question is, will quarterback Lenoris Sellers play in this game, or is it going to be Robbie Ashford? I am going to pick Ole Miss to win this game. However, I do think that no matter if it is Lenoris Sellers or Robbie Ashford starting at quarterback for South Carolina, I do think South Carolina, they do make this game close. And when you're trying to pull off an upset, you have to stay in the game start to finish. And I do think South Carolina, they do have the ability to do that. But what's going in Ole Miss's favor with this new 12-team playoff? The one defeat to Kentucky, if they can win out, they'll make the college football playoff. It doesn't matter if they win the SEC championship or not. They would have the resume to get in with this only loss being to Kentucky. A 4-team playoff, and I do think Ole Miss would go into this game with a much different mentality. But now, with this new 12-team playoff, one loss does not end your season when you are a Power 4 team. And given the SEC, perhaps 2 losses doesn't end your season necessarily. I am going with Ole Miss to bounce back and respond to last week's loss to Kentucky. But South Carolina, I do think they are a very gritty team, and they will make this game close from start to finish. Number 8, Miami and Cal. This is the college game day game of the week, and Cal had a bye week last week, an extra week to prepare for Cam Ward and Miami. And Miami, they narrowly escaped the upset against Virginia Tech last week in what was arguably the most controversial game of the season so far. Miami is ahead with 3 seconds left. Virginia Tech, a defiant last stand. The ball is thrown. It's in the end zone, and we don't know what happens next. We see a Miami player running out of the end zone with the ball in his possession, but then it's signaled Virginia Tech touchdown, and after a review for several minutes, it's determined that it's an incomplete pass, and Miami narrowly escapes. And ultimately, it was survive and advance for Miami. And lots of outrage on the internet on Friday night, talking about how this was all set up to protect Miami, to have them remain undefeated, and to not hinder their season, to keep Cam Ward in the Heisman race, to keep him ahead of the Heisman race. As Cam Ward, going into this past week, he was at least my Heisman favorite at this point. But Jalen Milroe, he surpassed him this past week. And there was other comments I saw about how if it was any other ACC team, it would have been a touchdown 100%. But the thing is, there was no reason for the game to ever even be in that situation. If something goes differently in this game, this play never happens, and there's no outrage on social media. And the reason why I say that is, the first series of the game for Miami, it's a turnover. Virginia Tech, they have a short field. They take advantage of the short field and score a touchdown. But then later in the game, Miami, it looks like they're starting to figure out the game. They're ahead, and they're about to increase their lead. Cam Ward throws a touchdown pass, but it's called back for holding. And then the very next play, Cam Ward throws an interception. So it is quite possible that one less Miami turnover, and this isn't even being discussed because this play wouldn't even happen. But this does work in Miami's favor, though, because I do feel like if this happened again to Miami like it did last season, then I do think that it would be a season breaker for them, and they would probably go into this game and ultimately lose. Cam Ward is second in the FBS in passing yards with 1,782, only behind Jackson Dart. They're second in total offense behind Ole Miss, averaging about 586 yards per game. Cal, in their last game against Florida State, they were in the game from start to finish, but 2 missed field goals was the difference in that game for Cal. For Cal to pull off the upset win this game, run the football, as Miami allowed 206 rushing yards to Virginia Tech last week. I do think if Cal runs the football efficiently and often in this game, then I do think Cal will pull off the upset, but I am going to go with Miami in this game. But I did say in my Week 5 college football takeaways this past Saturday night, which if you want to take a look at that, it's under my YouTube Shorts page. I said that if Miami has a downfall this season and they don't win the ACC, it'll be because of their defense and not because of Cam Ward. I do think Miami wins this game. Would I be surprised if Cal won this game? No, I would not. But I'm not expecting them to win. I am taking Miami. Closing things out with the only top 25 matchup of the week. Number 9 Missouri and number 25 Texas A&M. Missouri had a bye week last week, while A&M, they got a very decisive 21-17 victory over Arkansas. And I did address last week For A&M to win against Arkansas, they did have to limit the big plays defensively, as they gave up two big defensive plays that went for touchdowns against Bowling Green the week prior in what was a 26-20 game against Bowling Green. And on the very first Arkansas possession, Arkansas had a 75-yard touchdown play to begin the game. And then later on in the first quarter, Arkansas, they ran a fake punt, and it was successful, which led to Arkansas' second touchdown of the game. And A&M, they found themselves down 14-7 at the end of the first quarter. But the defense, they did play well defensively, only allowing 3 points in quarters 2 through 4. But they still allowed almost 380 yards of offense to Arkansas, which I guess that's not too bad considering Arkansas is in the top 15 in total offense. But allowing 379 yards of offense, that is not going to win you many games. But luckily, A&M, they did just enough to win that game. And A&M right now is a 2-point favorite in this game, which I can understand why the sports books would say that, as A&M, they have looked like a completely different team since the week 1 loss to Notre Dame, and they were holding their own in that game, but the game got away from them in the final 3 minutes of that game. The offense just couldn't generate much offense in that game. But ever since they turned to Marcel Reed at quarterback, they have looked like a team that could be a team that could fly under the radar later on in the season, as long as they keep playing clean football. And that's a big portion of A&M's success in this 4-game winning streak that they're on, is Marcel Reed is playing clean football. A&M is playing clean football. In his 3 starts, he has 514 passing yards, 6 touchdown passes, and 0 interceptions, and also 184 rushing yards. While Missouri, they have arguably the best receiver in the country in Luther Burden III, but I do think that Travis Hunter, he does have a strong case of being the best receiver in the country. And I am curious to see how Missouri's defense will be able to defend against Marcel Reed on the ground. In Missouri's recent 2 games, behind early against Boston College, but they did rally to get the win. And the defense, they forced turnovers they needed to. Then the week after that, a 30-27 victory over Vanderbilt in overtime, in what was a survive and advance game for the Tigers. Against Thomas Castellanos, I have talked about multiple times this season so far that in games where there is a massive point spread for that game, which this is probably not a good example, but I'm just saying that mobile quarterbacks, with them having the ability to extend plays and to scramble, they held Thomas Castellanos in check, 13 carries for 16 yards. And against Diego Pavia, 84 yards on 17 carries. If Missouri's defense can contain Marcel Reed, I do think there's a chance Missouri does win. Both starting running backs are in the top 25 in rushing yards this season. Le'Veon Moss, the difference maker against Arkansas, 471 on the year, 21st in the FBS. And Missouri running back Nate Noel, 441 rushing yards, 25th in the FBS. I am going to pick Missouri to win this game. I know that A&M is favored by 2 points, but Missouri, they are off of a bye week, while A&M, they're off of a game where they had to battle all 60 minutes of that game. And I'm going to pick Missouri to pull off the upset, even though I feel like Missouri, they should be favored in this game, but I just think A&M is getting that home field advantage, and that's why they're a 2-point favorite. And that will do it for my Week 6 college football predictions. If there was a game I did not predict this week that you would like my opinion on, please leave in the comment section and I will give you a response. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. For those of you that tune in for the NFL picks, the Week 5 NFL predictions, they will be up tomorrow. For those of you that don't, enjoy the games this Saturday, and I hope to see you back next week, as these next few weeks after this week, I do think it will be a serious tone setter for the rest of the season. Have a good one.